NPR Music. I'm Ana Maria Sayer.
And I'm Bobby Carter. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. From Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts. And from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, for nearly a century, supporting efforts to promote a just, equitable, and sustainable society. More at mott.org.
Hi, this is David Gans, host of the Grateful Dead Hour, the weekly audio postcard from the wide musical world of America's best-loved band. Join me for the Grateful Dead Hour, Saturday afternoons at 5 on WAER, your local NPR station from Syracuse University.
Sugar magnolia, blossoms blooming, it's all empty and I don't care. So my baby down by the river.
You're listening to 88.3 FM, WAER Syracuse, your local NPR station from Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player box out. They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy.
It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Really happy to say this. Trevor Pena Jr., he'll be a captain next year.
Well, if you had heard that announcement back in December, you wouldn't think Trevor Pena would be leaving, but here we are. Grab your popcorn, sit back, and relax because we've got you covered for the next hour. Welcome into Sports Night on 88.3 alongside Sam Reese. I'm Jared Valentin. We'll be on WAER from 8 to 9, breaking down all things Syracuse athletics. If you want to join the conversation at any point in today's show, do so. Call in at 315-443-2011. That's 315-443-2011. You can text us as well at 315-556-3929 and check out our Twitter and YouTube live streams at WAER Sports Talk. Sam, we start with a blockbuster announcement on the gridiron. Tuesday morning, Trevor Pena announced he's entering the transfer portal after previously being announced that he would be a captain for this next year.
And I would like to say it's shocking news, but in the current world, Jared, that we're living in, the NIL era of college athletics, nothing can be surprising at this point in terms of even players that you expect to play a big role on a certain team like Trevor Pena with Syracuse. It's not surprising at the end of the day that he's doing this because at the end of the day, Jared, it all comes down to money now. And I think we're at the point where we're too deep in where college athletics is just ruined at this stage. It really is.
It's almost
it's terrible. Yeah, I agree.
It's done so much damage over the last few years, the NIL landscape and athletes going over, fighting for betting on themselves and asking for more money. And it was reported that Trevor Pena wanted $2 million And Fran Brown said no. And Trevor Pena said, well, I'll pack up my bags and I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, hey, good for Fran Brown. I'm on his side here because what are we doing? $2 million?
Yeah, that's absurd.
That's ridiculous. that's like a solid entry-level contract. Some NFL guys, that's how much they're making, if that, in their early years, rookie season. I read a stat that Brock Purdy in the last couple years has only made $3 million. And the dude went to a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So $2 million in NIL is ridiculous. I mean, Trevor Pena is great, but good on Fran Brown for saying, the team is bigger than one individual. Yeah, it hurts you. I mean, this is a brutal loss. But again, in the current landscape of college athletics, Jared, it's unfortunate because Syracuse, unfortunately, isn't top tier in terms of the college football world.
Absolutely.
So if you're as talented as Pena is, and don't get me wrong, he's very talented. There's a reason why he's going into the portal. Right, yeah, and he has a chance to make more NIL money. There's other teams that are going to be interested and will probably take him. I saw reports today that I think he visited Penn State, Miami. I've heard rumblings. It could be between the Hurricanes and the Nittany Lions. I mean, Penn State's a team that just went all the way, to the national championship and made a deep run in the college football playoffs.
There has to be a limit and a cap of what, as a head coach and as a program, you're willing to accept, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that Pena. I mean, it's a little out of his mind to want $2 million, sure. But if you accept that, right? If you're Fran Brown and Syracuse, and you say, okay, you had a great season for us, you had a breakout year, we'll give you that $2 million. Then the floodgates are going to open, and you have other players that are suddenly going to see that and want more and start betting on themselves and start demanding more money. And it's a giant snowball effect where if you accept Pena wanting that much money, who else is going to ask for more? I mean, there's got to be some sort of limit. There's got to be some sort of tipping point. And I agree with what you're saying. You're agreeing with Fran Brown saying, look, we like you, Trevor Pena, but $2 million is just not. That's too much.
No, I mean, it's still a brutal loss at the end of the day. I also saw, reports that, Pena, I don't know if there's how much truth there is to this, but he had his questions about Ricky Collins' ability at quarterback, and that's another reason why, see ya out the door. I mean, if you're doubting your own quarterback in saying these things and want that much money, I mean, what are we doing here? And it's unfortunate because there's no loyalty anymore. It's just a big free agency market at this point, Jared. Because,
and it's not just college football.
No, it's correct. I mean, college basketball is ridiculous too, and some other sports as well. And it's very sad because Trevor Pena, I mean, you heard it right there. Back in December, he was given the role of captain. I mean, he led the entire ACC in receptions last season. He was going to be the guy for this team.
Right, exactly.
Receiver number one. He was going to be the star of the show for the Syracuse team. Fran Brown, trusted him at least a few months ago to be one of those captains. And he had battled injuries multiple seasons to get to where he was.
Right.
Trevor Pena was a great story, and he had a great season last year, and it felt like he was building a lot of momentum to just go off, really, this season in Orange. But nope, it doesn't matter that he was going to be captain. He says, I have an opportunity to play elsewhere.
I'm betting on myself and going elsewhere.
Yeah, for more money, and he's going to do that. I mean, you can't really blame the athlete too much as well. I just wish there's no, again, we're too deep in at this point where it's out of control, and I just wish there was still loyalty like back in the day, but when the money gets involved, you can't have that at all.
Right. And Trevor Pena has battled a ton of adversity. You talked about the injuries. He missed the entire 2023 season, and the stats back up the fact that he had a breakout year last year and was one of Syracuse's primary options. He played in all 13 games, 84 catches, 10 total touchdowns, and over 900 yards in 13 games played for the Orange. I mean, that's a great option. That's a big loss for Syracuse. And those stats culminated in that second-team All-ACC performance, but at the end of the day, he wants to go where the money talks.
Yeah, he does. And I am curious because you bring up those stats, and him and Kyle McCord seem to have some, great chemistry throughout last season. It does make me think about, with these reports of perhaps Pena doubting Ricky Collins, who will be the new starter. In theory, if Kyle McCord had another year of eligibility and came back, does that change things at all for Pena, and would he have come back more willingly? I think it's worth bringing up at least.
Sure.
Maybe Ricky Collins has to do with some of this too. The money is number one. I have no doubt about it. But I think it's valid to bring that point up. And to be fair to Pena, I do have my doubts about this team. A big reason why is now that Trevor Pena's gone too.
Right.
But
He
just
just
before
added
that
that.
news, with the schedule Syracuse has, and a guy in Ricky Collins now at quarterback who has never started. He was, the backup in his few seasons at LSU. There's reason to have doubts there. But again, Pena had earned that captain role heading into the season. Everything was there for him to have a breakout campaign for the Orange and take his game to even another level. And now he's gone. We'll see where he ends up, Jared.
Were you surprised by Trevor Pena's decision to enter the transfer portal? Join the conversation and let us know. Call in at 315-443-2011. You can text us at 315-556-3929 and check out our Twitter and YouTube streams at WAER Sports Talk. Jared Valentin alongside Sam Reese from 8 to 9 on SportsNite here on WAER. The question that follows, Sam, obviously Trevor Pena's leaving, but at some point you have to move on. And who fills his shoes? Is it Justice Ross Simmons? Is it Daryl Gill Jr.? Those are kind of the two names that come to mind right away. I mean, who sticks out to you as that guy? And those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I'm not feeling confident at all about this receiving group, Jared. If I had to pick someone, it's Daryl Gill. I mean, out of all of the returners, because of course Jackson Meeks gone, Aronde Gadsden gone, and now Trevor Pena. Yeah, we talk about how it's free agency now with the transfer portal. I think you have to get a really good receiver in the portal. I don't know how feasible that is. Again,
use the portal to your advantage.
Yeah, I think you have to, or else, no offense to Daryl Gill, but I don't love that being your option as wide receiver number one.
Yeah.
He was the most consistent out of the returners again from last season. I mean, you look at Justice Ross Simmons, but he did not prove himself last year. I mean, he was basically a non-factor the first half of the season. I remember it took forever for him to finally make his first catch. There was a lot of hype around him transferring in from Colorado State. He's going to have to play a bigger role this season.
He had his
but
moments,
he only had
but
about 200 yards here. In 9 catches, as I look at last year's stats. I mean, he was barely a factor. So Daryl Gill's the only guy that was involved a decent amount in the passing game last year that's coming back. You have to go into the portal and get someone.
Right, and I'm right there with you in terms of Daryl Gill Jr. out of him or Ross Simmons. And if you compare the two from what they did last season, you mentioned the 9 receptions that Ross Simmons had. Daryl Gill had 31, so he was a more utilized option last year out of those two receivers. 570 yards. They both had 2 touchdowns. But it's slim pickings almost, Sam. And I agree. You got to get somebody in the portal. Use that to your advantage. If you're going to have players that are getting up and leaving this Syracuse program, you can also have players leaving other programs and coming to Syracuse. Fran Brown just had an amazing year with the Orange. He can leverage that and use that to entice people who may have not considered Syracuse otherwise, because Syracuse wasn't relevant before this.
For sure.
To maybe join the program and, start building some of those names.
I hope you're right, Jared, and I want to believe you're right. Again, I'm calling it free agency now in college football.
Right, and that's a great way to describe it.
Exactly. It's going the portal, a.k.a. the portal, is open for a while here. So it's still the early goings, you could say, of the spring, where there's going to be a whole lot more movement happening. But so far, it's been a big name out the door in Trevor Pena, and there hasn't been any big name coming in yet.
Right.
I'd like to think I'll stay patient and Fran Brown can work his magic and get a big name to come in here out of the portal. But until that happens, I'm not sure. And I don't know if Syracuse is the greatest draw, Jared. I don't know. I mean, I think guys love to play for Fran Brown after what, from an outside looking in, what he did last year. But I also, if I'm a player, I say, I look at, again, Syracuse's schedule this season. Like, if you're a guy in the portal who's an upperclassman who maybe just has 1 year of eligibility left, like, how much are you going to get out of that? You look at the daunting schedule Syracuse has. No more Kyle McCord. Again, you have a quarterback in Ricky Collins.
That alone is
who
a significant
is an
loss.
unknown commodity. That's enough to turn me away. And if you're talented enough, go to a better ACC program, Big Ten, you name it. Because, again, I'm talking about, like, getting a real big name coming in, and you're going to be in competition, with the likes of Miami, Clemson, perhaps, for some of these receivers that could be available. And I don't know, Jared. I'm not sure. I'd like to think Fran Brown can get it done, but we'll
It's
see.
a waiting game, and look, Fran Brown did a tremendous job last year with bringing in guys. He brought in Kyle McCord, which was the flagship signing.
Great
and
signing.
Look, to your point, this is not the same team that won 3 ranked games for the first time since 1998. You lose Kyle McCord, you now lose Trevor Pena, and you're trying to fulfill those shoes. But to that point as well, Fran Brown still, as a first-year head coach, keep in mind, he wasn't a head coach before this. He was a defensive backs coach at Georgia, and he himself did a great job with this Orange program. He was the one to bring in Kyle McCord.
He was.
He helped Trevor Pena ascend to that next level after missing the entire season with an injury.
That's why I'd like to believe he can get someone to come in that's going to
And I know this is not the
get
same
these fans excited.
team.
Yeah.
But would Kyle McCord have thought about coming to Syracuse if Fran Brown wasn't the coach in December? If Dino Babers was still running the ship, driving the boat? I mean, I don't think so. So yes, I do agree. This is not the same team that upset number 6 Miami in the Dome to close out the regular season. This is not the same team that won 3 ranked games in a campaign for the first time since 1998. But Fran Brown is still here. That's the one constant that Syracuse has. And he can use his leverage of that, the fact that he did this with a great team in his first year here to try and get those assets that you're looking to see.
I'm with you. And again, I'm a fan of Fran Brown after what he did in his first season. Again, it's not easy to take over a program, be a head coach for the first time, as you said, Jared, for a team that had been middling for a while. I mean, Dino Babers was a bad coach. It's as simple as that. They were mediocre.
You can guarantee the annual ACC collapse.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a guarantee.
So what Fran Brown did has to be, in year one, has to be enticing to a lot of players. But then at the same time, Trevor Pena, despite that, says, nah, I'm good. In the current era of college athletics, I'm going to go take some more money because you're not giving me enough. That's what's sad, Jared, because Fran Brown clearly built a relationship with a guy like Trevor, and I'm sure they still respect each other a lot. But even with, that bond formed and Pena having a really good season last year, being named a captain for this year, he still leaves. I think other people look at that and say, wow, that's pretty crazy. That's where we are right now in college athletics. It's not just a Syracuse thing.
Right. Where does Coach Brown go to fulfill the shoes that Trevor Pena just left? You can call in and give us your thoughts at 315-443-2011. You can shoot us a text on our text line at 315-556-3929. Check out our Twitter and our YouTube as well at WAER Sports Talk all show long. Does Syracuse and Fran Brown look at the portal? Or do they try and get somebody within the program right now to take that next step? It's truly a toss-up. It can go either way. And to your point earlier, people might not want to come here if the players that helped make everything that we talked about happen are leaving.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways because there's so many players now that, not all comparable to Pena. I mean, he's a really good receiver. Well, again, one of the best in the ACC last
Second
year.
Team all conference.
Yeah. So not on, the same status as him, but maybe, a player who wasn't on, a power 4 team that has belief in themselves and balled out for a mid-major, that puts their name in the portal, and that could be a good commodity to get. So, again, it goes both ways because there's so many guys that have a similar mindset to that nowadays, where there's just a million players in the portal, that there is talent available out there that you can get. It's a matter of, how talented of a player can you grab? Because, again, it's going to be very tough to fill in for a guy like Pena, never mind the fact that Meeks and Gadsden are no longer on the team as well. The receiving core is what concerns me here for sure.
And, we talked about some of the players leaving. When I was first posed this question, my mind went to Jackson Meeks, but then I remembered, oh, wait, he's a senior. He's also gone. So it's really trying to find anybody at this point if you're Syracuse. But I want to go back really quickly to, we talked about guys, Justice Ross Simmons, Darryl Gill Jr., potentially taking that next step. And right now, it may not look like they can based on the production they had last year. Ross Simmons, only 9 receptions. Darryl Gill Jr., only 31.
Yeah.
But when we talked about Trevor Pena all show so far, and who was he before this season? A player who was out for the entire year, was not utilized very much in the offense, and then Fran Brown comes to the Cuse, and he has a breakout year. He ascended to what he was and what he is now. It's not like he was that beforehand last year, or excuse me, the year before, and then continue that into this season. He got injured, and even before his injury, was not getting the
he was
stats,
only really a special teams guy.
Stats, the touchdowns, the receptions that had the fans going crazy inside the dome. He was not making those plays before his injury, and then he was injured for the whole year. So he was a guy who came up from, I don't want to say nothing, but a diminished role, and took that next step under Fran Brown and became the receiver that everyone knows him for today. So we talk about guys like Justice Ross Simmons and Darryl Gill Jr. Can they make a jump like that? It's not a guarantee, but it has happened before within this Syracuse program. Maybe they can take the next step, and then maybe that can help fulfill the void a little bit of the shoes that Trevor Pena left.
I suppose that's a possibility. I haven't seen enough. Again, Gill's promising, but I don't trust him as the number one guy necessarily. But it might have to be that way. And then Ross Simmons, I don't know. I mean, he barely made an impact last year, which was a bit underwhelming. And we're talking about, Jared, all of the offensive question marks, but I would love quickly to just delve into the defensive side of things, because honestly, just as important of a loss as Pena, maybe even more, was announced earlier today, and that was Murad Watson, who was an All-American freshman defensive lineman, announced he's going into the portal. So we talk about all of these question marks on the offensive side, but Syracuse just lost one of its most important people on that defensive line. I mean, this guy is the real deal. He proved that in his freshman year, and now he's out the door. Again, another reason to be concerned, Jared.
Yeah, no, certainly, and especially the defensive end of the ball as well as the offense. I mean, it's not just one end, to your point, that Syracuse has to worry about. It's the defense as well. When one door closes, another one opens. We'll have to wait and see who steps up for the Orange this year in light of Trevor Pena and Murad Watson. We're up against our first break here on Sports Night, but when we return, we'll stay on the turf, but shift over to men's lacrosse. Number 7 Syracuse getting ready for a big road matchup with number 12 Duke. We'll have our talk reporter Luke Burgess join us to break down that contest and more. Stick with us right here on Sports Night.
Thanks for listening. We hope you're enjoying this WAER sports broadcast. Our sports staff goes where the teams go, home and away, and prepare for days before each game broadcast. Our talk show and podcast hosts analyze games, pore over stats, and keep up on sports trends. These and many behind-the-scenes opportunities are made possible by listener donations. So if you're a fan or an alum, donate to keep our sports legacy strong at WAER.org and click donate.
I'm Jesse Thorne. This week on Bullseye, Josh Gad. He's the voice of Olaf from Frozen. You want a selfie with him or an autograph? Sure, no problem. He's glad to do it. But there is one thing that he will never do.
When people are like, can you call my kid? I'm like, you don't want that. Trust me, you don't want that.
It always ends in tears. Hear more on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Sunday morning at 11 on WAER.
Garry Kasparov, the chess champ, grew up under Soviet rule and considered the U.S. a beacon. But he believes current U.S. policies dim that light.
What Trump is doing now, it's destroying American reputation. Because America is now, it's not so much America first, but America alone.
Garry Kasparov and his new newsletter, The Next Move, Saturday on Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
And just like that, we are back on Sports Night, your favorite Friday night show here on WAER. Every Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. Tonight, no different. Sam Reese alongside Jared Valentin. And why wouldn't we be with you talking Syracuse athletics? So much going on around the Hill. We broke down football quite a bit with some portal news, but a team in season right now, Syracuse men's lacrosse, winding down its regular season. They're on the road to take on Duke. If you have any thoughts on this matchup, give us a ring. Call us at 315-443-2011. You can also shoot us a text. The number for that, 315-556-3929. As always, interact with us, please, on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk. You can also watch us on YouTube. All right, well, if you're tired of just hearing Jared and myself, which I wouldn't blame you, good news. We have our reporter for tomorrow's game between 7th-ranked Syracuse and number 12 Duke on the line, Luke Burgess. Luke, I'm assuming you made it down to Durham safely.
We did, Sam, not too long ago either. But I am currently right downtown. It is a gorgeous night, not a cloud in the sky, beautiful weather as well, so we're excited for our stay. But yes, we made it down safe.
So just quickly, downtown Durham, is there anything to do there?
It's pretty nice, yeah. I mean, right now I'm outside on like a main street, just outside a restaurant that I'm about to eat in after I'm finished up with you guys. And then to my right, there's a little shopping district with like these overhanging lights over the street.
Okay.
And I think maybe we'll go check that out afterwards. It's really active right now. It's really nice. I'm enjoying it a lot. Haven't seen too much yet because we only got here later in the afternoon toward the early evening. But we're going to do a little bit of exploring after this. And it's about 77 degrees right now and like slightly breezy, so I don't think you could ask for much better weather.
All right, well, hey, it's 70 here, so we'll take it here in the 315, but it sounds great down there in Durham. Let's focus on the game, Luke, because right. I know you want to have fun down there in Durham tonight, but you've got your priorities set straight, breaking this matchup down between the Orange and the Blue Devils first, and this is a big one here. Penultimate game of the regular season. Syracuse coming off that loss to Cornell. Are you overall, though, confident that they can bounce back tomorrow against a Duke team that I personally have been underwhelmed by?
Yes, I am confident that Syracuse is the favorite in this game, and I think for good reason. The Orange, I think on paper, are, Sam, a better team than Duke, to be quite honest with you. But it's also not a game where you can take it for granted. You can't have a slow start maybe like you did against a Manhattan to go back a couple weeks, or
Cornell,
even a Virginia. I mean, this is a Virginia team. We remember that game at the start of ACC play where Syracuse didn't play too hot in the first quarter, went down a little bit, but they had the ability to claw back. Duke is still a top 15 team. I mean, you cannot underestimate a team like this. I think Syracuse needs to come out hot, and that was the focus for Gary Gate and co. talking to the media this week, talking about having that good first quarter, because it wasn't great against Notre Dame. Of course, it wasn't good against Cornell, and it burned them.
You're right, Luke. That was one of the things he mentioned earlier this week was whether we've had good first quarters, whether Syracuse has had good third quarters, there hasn't been enough games where Syracuse has put it together and gotten that full 60 minutes that we all know Syracuse to have success doing. I want to go to Jimmy McCool specifically. 16 goals allowed, just 7 saves last time out against Cornell. Arguably his worst game of the season. I'll say it's his.
I think it's pretty inarguable, Jared. It was definitely his worst game.
I was going to say it's his. In my eyes, it's his worst game of the season. How do you see him doing tomorrow against Duke? Do you think he has a bounce back game, or are you expecting something maybe slightly better from Cornell, but not as egregious?
No, I'm pretty confident that he's poised to have a bounce back, because if you look at this Duke team, certainly their biggest weakness this year compared to last season, where they were obviously very, very good, made a run toward the Final Four, is their offense is completely different. No more Dyson Williams, of course, no more Brennan O'Neill, Josh Zawada, another guy who contributed pretty heavily for them last year. They're all gone. And so I think the strength of this Duke team lies in its defense, but I think for Jimmy McCool, who, if you remember that Harvard game, that was kind of the game that his struggle game, right, before this Cornell game last week. The next game he comes back and bounced back really smoothly. So I think he is poised to do that again. It's just going to come down to focus. But, guys, there's really no reason. He hasn't given us a reason to not believe in him to bounce back this year. He's had bad, isolated games, but it has been just that, kind of fluky, isolated incidents, and he's followed that up every single time with a really stellar performance. So I'm expecting a lot out of him, but I'm sure he's also expecting a lot out of himself. And with a weakened Duke offense, I would not be surprised if you get a gem from him tomorrow.
Luke, I'm right there with you, and you read my mind a little bit because you went back to that Harvard game, which was what I was going to point out was after he got benched in that third quarter, just 5 saves on 10 goals allowed. The next game, 11 saves, and granted, that was on the road against an unranked Utah team, and the whole time at the time I was saying, I want to see it against a ranked team, another good team like Harvard or a team even better. And then what did he do? He went the next game, followed that up with 12 saves, which was then a season high against Johns Hopkins. And
that was a great game.
I was calling into the double overtime, and I had said he was my player of the game in that win.
Sure.
For those reasons, we've seen this happen where Jimmy McCool has a not great performance, and then he comes back out and he dominates. I'm right there with you, Luke. I see him bouncing back. I see him rebounding just because it's something that he has already done earlier this season, and I don't think he has an issue doing it twice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You kind of said everything that we just touched on, so I agree.
Luke, I'm curious. Do you feel like, if you rewind to last season, just one more thing here on McCool that I think is intriguing, actually. When these two teams, remember Syracuse played Duke twice last year. There was that 10-4 lockdown defensive performance from Syracuse in the regular season that they won, but then
the best game they played all year.
Yeah, exactly. But then in the ACC tournament, Duke won. And that was a dominant first quarter by the Blue Devils. Will Mark, who was the starting goalie at the time, easily his worst performance of the season. I believe he only stopped 1 of 9 shots in that opening quarter.
Yeah, probably the worst start of his entire career.
You could say that. So the fact that McCool went in for the rest of that game, the final 3 quarters, and did a decent job, I thought. Syracuse only ended up losing that game by 5 after they were outscored 9-1 in that opening quarter. Do you think that plays a factor at all that, against this opponent, that was, in my opinion, Jimmy McCool's big moment towards the end of the season where he finally got, almost basically a start. He played 3 quarters there, after playing behind Will Mark for most of the season, because I think it might play a little bit of a factor here.
Yeah, not really in my mind, because I guess the only way I could see what you're saying is if he was facing a similar offense, but, Sam, this is basically a completely retooled offense this year. Right. And sure, the jerseys stay the same, but the numbers and the faces are different. Mm-hmm. It's maybe a similar style. I guess I could see some type of benefit in the way that they run the offense, but it is different too, though, because there's not nearly as much of a focus on one player this year. Of course, last year you're always going to, and years prior as well, you always have to scout around Brennan O'Neill when you're playing Duke. So that's not the case anymore. Obviously, he's on to the PLL, and I don't really feel like there is any carryover. I think McCool, maybe if it's the beginning of the season, then there's an argument to be made for that. But at this point of the year, he's faced a bunch of different opponents, and seemingly McCool will be the goalie for this team next year as well, pending any type of transfer or anything else that could possibly happen in the world of college athletics that we're in now. But when you have a bunch of different faces, you're going to see this Duke team every single year, and he'll see them again next year if he stays with the Orange, because he'll still be in the ACC. So I don't really see any reason why last year's game would carry over to tomorrow.
And one of those opponents that you briefly that you alluded to, Luke, was Notre Dame a few weeks ago. And I want to go back to that game a little bit because Notre Dame, a better team than Duke is this year, one of the best offenses in the country, and Jimmy McCool held his own. 10 saves, 9 goals allowed, but specifically, there was a stretch in the third quarter where Joey Spallina and Riley Figueres were given penalties, and they sat out, and it was a 2-man-up opportunity for Notre Dame for about a minute, I believe it was, and Jimmy McCool saved the ball with only 5 guys on his defensive end and then helped clear it past midfield against an offense that I believe it was 15 goals a game they had averaged at that point in the year. He's faced better teams than this Duke squad with the loss of Brendan O'Neill, Dyson Williams, Josh Zawada, like you mentioned. He's faced tougher teams. He's dominated, and he's had bounce-back games that we talked about a little bit earlier. Again, I'm going all in on him bouncing back and having another strong performance like we've seen throughout this season.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely think he'll have a good game tomorrow. Although I do think, being at home helps. So this game's obviously on the road. That's going to play a factor for sure. So he's got to come out with a strong performance. They certainly need him to pick up a win tomorrow. And I do feel like maybe this matchup is a little bit overlooked. That can't happen either.
No, it can't. And especially for me, Luke, why this can't be overlooked is, I'm a little down on Duke this year. They're not as talented of a team, especially on the offensive end, as you said, where the scoring is much more, even. I mean, Eric Molliver, the Maryland transfer, definitely is the man in terms of a balance in goals and assists, leading the team easily in points. But, there's not really a true goal scorer for this team above anyone else. But what I will say, Luke, since this is the second to last game of the regular season, Duke comes into this one 0-2 in conference play.
Right.
So I think the timing of this game, where Syracuse, in my opinion, with a 5-team conference, unfortunately your bye has to come at some point. Syracuse's bye week came at a bad time because they had momentum in conference play at 2-0.
And Sam, they were doubled up by Notre Dame, which was a team that we just talked about that Syracuse beat.
Correct.
And then they narrowly lost to UNC. Those are the 2 conference losses.
Yeah, absolutely. But for Syracuse, they have to get back into the groove of ACC play, where for this Duke team, Luke, they're 0-2 in conference play. If they lose this game, they play Virginia in the regular season finale. Those 2 teams would go into that matchup at 0-3, and the winner would snag the last spot for the ACC tournament to really keep both teams' hopes alive of making the NCAA tournament. So I have to imagine that's playing a huge factor, where Duke would rather much less pressure heading into that final game, because in theory, even 1-3 in conference play probably gets you into the ACC tournament. Remember, 4 out of 5 teams make it, and there's not as much pressure heading into that Virginia game. You agree?
Yeah, I think absolutely, and it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning a minute ago. It was kind of briefly passed over, but this game's obviously in Durham. It's not in Syracuse, and I think that plays a huge role.
Sure.
When Syracuse won that Notre Dame game, let's not forget, obviously, there's not going to be 11,000 fans at Koskinen Stadium tomorrow, but they have a good fan base that's going to show out. I mean, it's an ACC lacrosse game. You can always count on a good environment, and I made a claim on a double overtime that I didn't think that Syracuse might have won that game against Notre Dame if it hadn't been at home, despite how good they looked at times. I think home field makes a huge difference, even in lacrosse where you're getting smaller crowds than, say, like a basketball or a football where you talk about home field advantage. It makes a difference. And Duke is playing at home, and like you said, Sam, largely maybe playing for their season.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to make a claim because obviously, like you said, it's going to be that last ACC game against Virginia if they do lose tomorrow. But with the pressure on in the final game of the year, even if you make the ACC tournament at that point, you got everything going against you.
Yep,
I feel like tomorrow is really a must-win for Duke in its season, what's been a struggle of a year. And, this is a proud program that has a great tradition with Danowski as the coach as well. I mean, this is a guy who's just a proven winner. I think this is now his 35th season in charge, something like that. And, I mean, I know he's going to have his team prepared to play hard tomorrow. They do not want to lose this game, especially, like I mentioned before, in front of their home fans.
And, Luke, you want to talk about college lacrosse crowds making all the difference. I mean, look no further than the Johns Hopkins game that we briefly touched on about a month ago. I was at that game, and really, it was 8,600 people in attendance, which at the time was the most out of any game at the Dome at that point in the season. And I remember it was early in the game when Syracuse was just clearing the ball past midfield. I mean, the crowd was into it. They were erupting, and obviously,
yeah, you get momentum on your side,
right? And obviously, Syracuse and Johns Hopkins have a long rivalry, but that makes all the difference, especially in those early moments when the game is just getting started. You get the crowd involved like that, and then on that hidden ball trick that Joey Spallina had, the crowd lost their minds, and Syracuse ended up winning that game, and the crowd. What was a big reason why, because there were so many people there invested in early on and really making that much noise to help Syracuse get out in front.
Yeah, it obviously plays a huge factor, no doubt. I really think this will be like a 2 or 3 goal game tomorrow, either way. But it's not going to be a walk-away win for either side. You're going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to earn your goals as well. This Duke defense is going to be fired up to play. They do have a good defense, guys. We can't forget about that. So I really think that Syracuse is going to have to earn whatever it gets tomorrow. And like we just mentioned, they're going to be playing against a Duke team that's desperate. And, a lot of times pressure creates diamonds. I think this is a team with John Danowski that certainly will be prepared to be in that moment. You're never going to face a Duke team that's not prepared for the big moment because they've got a big-time coach.
Oh, yeah, they'll be ready. They'll be ready, no doubt about it. And you mentioned that real solid defense that Duke has, and I'm surprised I haven't mentioned him yet, but Joey Spallina, can he overcome that defense in this game? Is he going to show up? Because I don't know. I don't understand it with this guy. I really don't, Luke. I've tried to figure it out. I don't get it. I mean, the guy balled out against Notre Dame and then basically was a no-show against Cornell. I don't understand.
It's like he's on and off every other game.
Yeah, exactly. That's put
quite
well, Jared.
it's a matchup-based thing. One thing Joey Spallina doesn't do phenomenal against really big-body defenders. So that's something to look out for is who they have marking him in this game at the start. Look, if it's a more physical, taller guy, I think he might tend to struggle a little bit more. But then again, he kind of overcame that against Notre Dame. So,
exactly.
Another thing to watch for, I think, early on is where they set him up. We've seen a preview almost of Peyton Anderson playing more exclusively from X rather than Spallina. Spallina a little bit more in the lanes, dodging, and I think the message to him is always going to be to shoot more, right? Because when he's hitting the net, he scores. So it's really a question of if that shot percentage is high, if he's getting good shots consistently. And, he's not a downhill dodger. That's just the reality of it. I mean, the guy's a playmaker, so he's going to need help. But if he gets help, I think it opens up his game. He feels a little bit more comfortable to take some agency, take a couple of more shots. In terms of whether it'll show off or not, Sam, I mean, I don't know any better than you. It is tough to predict, right? Because you've seen games in the ACC like against Virginia where he struggled a little bit, and then games against Notre Dame where he completely dominated. So, I would have to think that coming off of a loss, he's going to be a little bit more motivated to kind of take it into his own hands. I feel like in any sport, guys are always a little bit more aggressive off of a loss because you feel like you need to make some type of difference.
Right.
So if I had to make a prediction, I'll say that I think Spallina does have a big game, but like I said before, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, you're listening to SportsNite here on WAER. We hope you're having as much fun as we are here on this Friday night. Give us a call, 315-443-2011. Sam Reese alongside Jared Valentin, currently joined by our reporter Luke Burgess down in Durham, North Carolina, ahead of tomorrow's clash between Syracuse men's lacrosse and Duke. And Luke, I'll say this much, in terms of, we talked about what's at stake for Duke, I agree with you. Season kind of on the line for them here.
Absolutely.
This is a big one for them. So in a scenario Syracuse loses this game, what are the implications there for the Orange? Because I would make the argument that, obviously Harvard worst loss of the season, no matter how you slice it. But this would be right up there. That would be a bad loss in my opinion. I don't care, how that it's a solid Duke team, even though maybe it's a little down year for them. I'd still consider it a bad loss here.
I think so because if you win that game last week against Cornell, then I think this game you're kind of playing with house money a little bit because obviously you don't want a disappointing loss in the penultimate game of the season, like you mentioned, but I do feel like at some point you're expected to have a loss down the stretch against all these good teams that are on Syracuse's schedule. Yeah. But, I think now you've had that loss kind of. And I almost feel like UNC and Duke, I hate to say that 4-0 in the ACC is like the expectation, but I feel like it kind of is, because that last game against UNC at home, I think you're expected to probably win that game for Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow, it is a weakened Duke team, and it's a Duke team last year that I think a weaker Syracuse team proved that it could beat. Now, albeit that was in the zone, but I think tomorrow the expectations are high. This is another chance for SU to make a statement. And, Sam, I think it's really going to be a game that is very defining in terms of the media's expectations, as well as the rest of the lacrosse world's expectations about what Syracuse can kind of do down the stretch here, because only 2 games away from the ACC tournament. If you win tomorrow, I think you kind of consider the Cornell game a little bit of a blip on the radar, and you say, all right, let's move forward and focus on the rest of ACC play, finish out the season strong. Right. If you lose tomorrow, I think Syracuse firmly falls out of one of the teams that you're legitimately talking about being in Final Four contention, and probably kind of just out of the conversation of any type of serious run this year. Other teams are really afraid to play, and they become more of that middle tier, kind of like what you're seeing with a Princeton, where I don't really think Princeton can compete for a national championship, but they're obviously a fantastic team, kind of like a UNC, and they kind of firmly fall into that tier. If you win tomorrow, I think all of a sudden it's still a conversation where how good is this team? What are they going to do down the stretch?
Yeah, and for Syracuse, at least, it's been kind of the Orange have been kind of bouncing off back and forth in that conversation, whether this team can really make a run or if they're a little bit on the fraudulent side of things. I mean, you have those statement wins like Notre Dame. And
they are not fraudulent. I mean, this is a good team. Like, don't get me wrong. A loss to the number 1 team in the country doesn't mean that you're fraudulent. And I mean, that was just a takeover from C.J. Kirst. I think, certainly, are they national championship contenders? I don't know, honestly. I think tomorrow we'll have a lot to say about that. But fraudulent is a different word.
Right. I should have rephrased it differently, but my point is that Syracuse has been kind of bouncing back and forth between is this team a true national title contender, or are they a little bit less than that? Because they've had those statement wins that we talked about, but then they also had those losses like Harvard, where at some points in the season, people have been saying, maybe this team can't compete like some thought they would. And my point being that Syracuse has kind of bounced around in that territory all game long, and I think a win against Duke would help solidify that a little bit more, like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree.
All right, we'll end on a good note then, with Jared and Luke agreeing. One more thing, Luke. I'm talking quick 5 seconds here. Does Syracuse get it done tomorrow?
I think they do, Sam. I think it's a fired-up team, and I think they proved that they could do it in a game with a lot of pressure against Notre Dame. Now, that was at home, but with the fact that Duke's a little bit of a weaker team than Notre Dame, I think tomorrow is kind of a repeat performance where they go out, punch another ACC team in the mouth. And I'll extend that a little bit. I do think they'll lose to North Carolina in the final game of the year. I think that team's really on a roll right now, but I have a feeling they finish 3-1 in the ACC, and tomorrow is that 3rd win.
All right, I'll allow 30 seconds because you're a nice guy. Luke, I would love to talk with you all night, but I'm going to let you enjoy.
I know you got more of a show to get to. I got burgers to eat, too, so I'm not complaining.
Well, I'm a little jealous of that. All right, enjoy the rest of your night in Durham and have fun in the sun at Koskinen Stadium tomorrow, all right?
Thanks so much, man. Have a good night.
All right, awesome. Great stuff from our reporter down in Durham, Luke Burgess. Should be a fun one between Syracuse and Duke tomorrow, a game you can listen to right here on these WAER airwaves. All right, the Orange still possibly a contender on the men's side. On the women's side, it might be a little bit of a different story. After a quick break here on SportsNite, Jared and I will close shop talking Syracuse women's lacrosse. And if you don't know what happened last night, well, you'll find out soon. Yeah, buckle up. SportsNite rolls on after this. Stick with us.
Your source for arts and entertainment information. WAER is supported by Syracuse Stage. Presenting Sense and Sensibility, adapted for the stage by Kate Hamill. Sense and Sensibility delivers audiences into the world of the Dashwood sisters, Jane Austen's destitute but determined heroines, as they navigate 18th century English society in search of stability after the death of their father. April 23rd through May 11th. Details and ticket information at syracusestage.org.
Keeping you in the groove, WAER Syracuse Public Media is proud to partner with CNY Jazz in presenting the Jimmy Van Heusen Cabaret, a celebration of the songwriting legacy of Central New York's own Jimmy Van Heusen, featuring performances by Cherie Giroux and Scott Dennis, a full menu, and jazz cocktails. Sunday, April 27th at 5 p.m. at the Sherwood Inn in Skinny Atlas. Doors open at 4 p.m. Details and ticket information online at cnyjazz.org or by phone at 315-479-5299.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Wrapping things up here on Sports Night alongside Sam Reese. I'm Jared Valentin. We're on from 8 to 9 on the WAER airwaves, breaking down all things Syracuse athletics. We talked about the men's lacrosse team and their big matchup against number 12 Duke on the road tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the women's squad was also back in action last night, and, well, it wasn't pretty. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, you can still do so. Call in 315-443-2011. You can shoot us a text as well at 315-556-3929. And you can check out our Twitter and our YouTube streams, as always, at WAER Sports Talk. Sam, let's address the elephant in the room. Syracuse
this team
fell to Boston College. An all too familiar phrase over the last few years, first of all. 17-2.
Yeah.
The 2 goals scored by the Cuse, the fewest in program history.
Ever, yep.
Second straight game. How about this one? Second straight game where an opposing player has scored at least 7 goals against the Orange.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be saying that, but here we are.
I don't think that's happened ever either. It's to your point, like BC, has had Syracuse's number year in, year out, the last 3 to 4 years now, 8th straight win for the Eagles over the Orange, but nothing even close to this dominant. In fact, they've mainly had very close down to the wire matchups. Last season's regular season finale went to overtime. And so for a program like Syracuse, I don't care that it's a down year. For a program
you can't lose by 15 to Boston College.
With so much history and prestige, that is Syracuse women's lacrosse, to lose not only by 15, but the fact that it was 17-2. That you only scored 2 goals, the fewest ever.
I don't know if it would have been much better if it was 30-15, but I understand.
That
would
have been better in my opinion.
17-2 is absurd, and look, this is
that is embarrassing. This
is a flat out embarrassment. I mean, Syracuse made history for all the wrong reasons last night. Down 7-0 after the first quarter.
Yeah, you knew it was over.
10-0 at the half. Mind you, Syracuse hadn't been shut out in a first half in 15 years before this game. Emma Ward, one of the best Syracuse players that the program has had, 0 points. This comes after she tied Katie Rowan with 164 points for the most in program, 164 assists for the most in program history. She goes pointless for the 3rd time in her SU career. And you talked about how Boston College has beaten Syracuse 8 times in a row in each of the last 8 meetings. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's the regular season, the ACC tournament, the NCAA tournament. Syracuse cannot beat Boston College. It's like when you're playing your older brother in 2K and he's got the advantage no matter what you do. He just knows the game better, and no matter what you do, you just lose to him every single time and time again. Syracuse just can't beat Boston College.
I'm with you. But I feel like this year is honestly even different than what you're saying. Like, this result was so bad that it wasn't a matter of I think heading into the game, a lot of people feared, the way both teams have been playing this year, that it'll be more lopsided and less close of a game than in the last few meetings and in years past. but I don't know about this dominant. Like, this was not even coming close. Like, this was never a competition. It was like women against girls. That's what it was. BC was simply at another level, Jared, than Syracuse. Like, and it's unfortunate, how talent-wise the Orange have taken that step back this year. I will say BC is unbelievable. I mean, the defending national champs, plenty of returners. I mean, Shea Dolce in goal. I mean, as embarrassing as it was for Syracuse to only score twice, they did have 23 shots. BC had 26.
That was one of the bright spots that head coach Kayla Traynor pointed out after the game last night.
She gave a ton of credit to BC, and I do understand why. I mean, Shea Dolce, that was some of the most insane goalkeeping I've seen. She's a one-of-a-kind talent. And then at the other end, Rachel Clark is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean 8 goals.
She was phenomenal.
Yeah, so I think last night further proved to me that in the ACC this year, it's Boston College and North Carolina, and then
everybody else.
Big step below, like a massive
everybody
step.
else.
Yeah, and usually Syracuse is right in that mix, and they're just part of the rest of the pack this year, which is very unfortunate. But I'll guarantee it. BC, North Carolina, it'll be the ACC championship, and then they'll play for a third time in the national championship. I mean, Northwestern's
the odds aren't very high there, but I like where you're going.
Sure, but I mean, crazy stuff happens in the postseason. I'm definitely confident, about the ACC statement of that part. But when you look at the whole picture, again, Northwestern's the only other team that I think maybe could be a threat, but it's between UNC and BC. They're gonna meet 2 more times, and that would be a heck of a championship game in both the conference tournament and national champion. Those 2 teams are levels above.
Can Syracuse still make some noise in the ACC tournament? You can call in and give us your thoughts. Join in on the conversation, 315-556-3929. You can text us as well at 315-4. Call in at 315. It's a little bit late. I'm sorry. 315-443-2011. And you can text us as well at 315-556-3929. There you go. That's how you get in at us and get at us on the show. Going back to what you said, Sam, you talked about Shea Dolce, the 13 saves. That was another area where head coach Kayla Traynor praised Boston College, right? Was the play in between the sticks for BC. And she was great, don't get me wrong, but if you look at the numbers from purely a number standpoint, in each of the last 3 times that Syracuse and BC have played, Shea Dolce has had double-digit saves. So, yes, she was great. She was phenomenal, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's nothing new with her.
It's not anything new or anything different that Syracuse hasn't seen before to justify a 15-goal loss.
No, I'm with you. You still can't just score 2 goals. I mean, they were being shut out until past the midway mark of the third quarter, which is just unheard of. And, I mean, you couldn't be at a lower point heading into the ACC tournament. I mean, first, the unranked loss to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that was bad enough.
Yeah, first time they've lost to an unranked team since 2018. And then this. I mean, the good thing, talking to Kayla Traynor and Sam DeVito after the game, they made a good point where the one good thing they can take out of this is that they still have lacrosse to play. Not every team makes the ACC tournament. They at least are in the conference tournament, and it's not like they ended the season on what would have been a horrible note. They still have more lacrosse to play, which is the ACC tournament next week, Jared. They're the 6th seed, will face the 3 seed Stanford, who they beat in double overtime. So I think honestly, you just have to wipe this one away from memory and look forward. I think they lose to Stanford, though. I do, in the ACC quarterfinals.
I see, and Syracuse played Stanford a little bit earlier in the season. Syracuse beat them in double overtime, so barely. I still have Syracuse beating Stanford in the ACC quarterfinals, but then I have a repeat of this exact outcome against Boston College. They're playing Boston College in that next round. If they do get past Stanford, and then they're getting demolished. There's absolutely no chance that Syracuse comes out on top on that game. And it's you talked about, okay, this is a chance for Syracuse to right some of its wrongs as of late going into postseason play. But you can also look at the other side of that and say, all right, where should we not be concerned that Syracuse is losing by 15 in the last game of the regular season?
They're not that
before
good.
the ACC tournament?
Yeah, right. And just one last thing, Jared. If they lose that ACC quarterfinal game to Stanford, I do still think they get into the NCAA tournament. But if you win that quarterfinal game, it's basically a guarantee. The NCAA committee released its top 10 rankings. It was in the middle of last night's game. They had Syracuse at 9.
I wonder where they stand now.
They had Virginia at 5, who's below Syracuse in the ACC standings. So that makes me think the committee thinks highly of the ACC. So I think as long as Syracuse doesn't lose big against Stanford, they still get into the NCAA tournament.
Well, we'll find out what Syracuse can do if the Orange can make some noise in the ACC tournament. That does it for us here on Sports Night. But our next broadcast is tomorrow. It's that matchup between Syracuse men's lacrosse and Duke that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. Game time is at 2. McCord Remodeling countdown to face-off at 1:30, and the double overtime up until 5:30 with Alex Burstein and Andrew Delapiana. Be sure to tune into that matchup right here on WAER. A couple thank yous to hand out before we sign off here on WAER Syracuse. Our producer, Rahil Jaswal, our engineer, Alex Burstein, our reporter from Durham, North Carolina, Luke Burgess, and our WAER Sports Talk Desk, Josh Sullivan and Jason Stalakis. That does it for us here on Sports Night. For Sam Reese, I'm Jared Valentin saying thank you so much for tuning in. So long, Syracuse.
Bye.